Hello, Sarah Sabian, Executive Leadership and Intuition Coach here. And in today's question time, I am going to be answering the question, Sarah, how do I get out of a negative thought spiral? So I'm going to preface this by saying if this is a question that resonates with you, well done, because at least you're aware that you have negative thoughts that might be influencing you in a negative fashion. Because a lot of people tend to normalize these thoughts, especially if they're having them over a long period of time and think, oh, well, what does it matter anyway? Which is kind of part of the whole negative thought spiral. So, this could be negative thoughts in relation to external things going on, but, and this is actually more important, it could be negative thoughts consistently in relation to yourself. So we are hardwired to focus on the negative anyway. If 10 good things happen to us in a day and one quote unquote bad thing happens, the tendency is to focus on the one bad thing that happens and blow it up out of all proportion. Now, you might say, well, what's the big deal? Well, because if you start beating yourself up and going down a negative thought spiral, you will start to create emotional dysregulation. You will start to create nervous system dysregulation. And this will affect how rationally and analytically you can show up and perform at work. And so it will affect your performance because whether you know it or not, or whether you like it or not, the thoughts that you recurrently tend to think affect your actions and behaviors. So even if you think, well, I set massive goals anyway, who cares? Well, if you keep beating yourself up all the time and not acknowledging anything that you've done along the way, it will affect your potential over time. So it becomes a kind of self-imposed ceiling that you put on yourself. So in this video, I'm going to give you one very, very simple foundational tool to stop those thoughts in their tracks. And it's literally called a pattern interrupt. The first step in a pattern interrupt is to develop more awareness of what you're thinking. So if you are finding yourself thinking negative thoughts about yourself or situations, tick. That's the time where you can start to apply this tool. And you can approach it a couple of ways. So one is very simply to stop it in its tracks. And I like to do that with humor. So, ha ha ha, oh, I'm thinking this thought that I always tend to think. I'm going to stop doing that right now. Humor in itself can be a pattern interrupt. So if you've ever seen someone very upset and then suddenly someone makes a joke, kind of dark humor, and they start laughing and it sort of snaps them out of it. Humor can be very effective at doing that. So instead of beating yourself up, you're learning to laugh and inject some humor into the ways that you habitually think. The second one is literally to just create a change. So to change physically or to change location. So an example of that is literally moving your body. So maybe you stretch, maybe you roll your shoulders around, maybe you give yourself a little shake because you are aware that you've had this thought and you're snapping yourself out of it physically. And that can work as well, where you just change location. Obviously, if that's possible for you, if you're in the middle of a meeting, that might not be possible. But if you can, just go outside for a second, change room for a second, so that you're actually drawing a hard line between what you're thinking so that you can interrupt that negative cycle. Now, obviously, this takes effort, but it is incredibly helpful when you are trying to build new neural pathways in the brain that are going to be much more helpful to you going forward. So, in order to do that, you need to be doing brain rewiring exercises around that. But you also want to be helping yourself by minimizing the amount of times you're banging the drum of old stories and retelling yourself old stories and having these old thoughts. So these pattern interrupts are helpful for you to stop banging those old drums so you can focus more on the things that you are positively trying to rewire into your brain.